Bourbon Street is one of those places that can seem over-explained by the present. The bars, the balconies, the noise, the sense that this was always the street New Orleans was heading toward. But that is the illusion. Bourbon Street did not begin as a nightlife brand. It began as part of the original colonial plan of New Orleans, and the street people recognize now is only the latest use of a much older corridor. New Orleans was founded by the French in 1718. In 1721, Adrien de Pouget laid out the early street grid and named one street for the House of Bourbon. That matters, because the name sounds like a tourism invention now. But its origin is dynastic, colonial, formal. Bourbon Street entered the city not as a pleasure district, but as part of an imperial town plan, and it sat inside a vulnerable urban experiment, the original footprint of New Orleans, near the river, strategic, commercial, and repeatedly tested by disaster. Then came the fires that changed the visual language of the whole quarter. The Great Fire of 1788 destroyed much of New Orleans. Another major fire followed in 1794. These were not just moments of loss. They were architectural turning points. Because the city was under Spanish rule, the rebuilding that followed helped produce the brick, stucco, courtyard, and ironwork character that many people now read as the natural look of old New Orleans. This is the first big rollback in the story. The street did not survive by preserving its first form. It survived by being rebuilt into another one. Before Bourbon Street became famous for nightlife, it was more residential and more mixed in use than the modern image suggests. Over the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the street moved toward vice, music, restaurants, drinking culture, and tourism. It stopped reading mainly as part of the old city and started reading as one of the city's stages. That transformation made it durable. It was not simply preserved as a colonial artifact. It was reused as an economic machine. That reuse brought pressure. In the 1960s, campaigns to clean up Bourbon Street targeted prostitution and adult entertainment. Later decades leaned harder into tourism. The street kept being adjusted between authenticity, commerce, regulation, and spectacle. At the same time, preservationists fought to protect the French Quarter as a living historic district. Then came Katrina. The quarter avoided the worst flood depths, but recovery still mattered. And by late 2005, Bourbon Street was already being used as visual proof that New Orleans was coming back. So, what did Bourbon Street have to survive to become what it is now? Colonial transfer, fire, architectural reinvention, vice economies, tourism packaging, preservation pressure, disaster recovery. That is why Bourbon Street matters beyond nightlife footage. It is not just where people go out. It is a corridor where New Orleans keeps showing its oldest survival habit: adaptation. Today the street can look like a settled cliché, but that is the illusion. It was planned for empire, rebuilt through fire, repurposed for pleasure, protected as heritage, and kept alive because the city refused to abandon it. That is the real dossier of Bourbon Street. Not a street with one true identity. A street that survived by remaining usable to each new version of New Orleans.
Subscribe for the next dossier.